to The Actor's Choice, where the actors have a chance to talk about themselves and their careers. Join us now for the next hour as we explore the marvelous industry of acting through actors and actresses from today's exciting show business world. And now, here's your host, Ron Brewington.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ron Brewington, and welcome to The Actor's Choice. The organization is called ICCC, or Inner City Cultural Center. This is a unique organization with the primary mission of utilizing the arts as a vehicle to increase cultural communications among ethnic and racial groups. Today, we have two guests from the organization. Our first guest is Ernest Dillihay. He's the planning committee chairman, and he's been here numerous times. He's an old friend. I was just telling somebody just a moment ago, there are two men in this town that know something about theater. He's one of them. The other guy is James Burks. It's with great pleasure we introduce you to Mr. Ernest Dillihay. Ernest, thank you very much.
Hey, Ron,
always a pleasure to have you.
Yeah,
always a pleasure.
Good.
He was a Marine. I'm a Navy man, so we just leave that alone.
It used to get us where we needed to go.
Thank you, Ernest.
Thank you. Service.
There's plans in the mix right now for an upcoming second-generation 50th anniversary event. Mm-hmm. Can you please tell us about it, sir?
Well, what we've been doing, last year we had the first of three, what we call 50th anniversary celebrations,
right.
Celebrating milestones in the organization Inner City Cultural Center's history. That is, right. In 1965 to 2015, 1966 to 2016, and 1967 to 2017.
Okay.
So basically, we looked at last year as the concept, the conceptualization of Inner City Cultural Center, and how it took shape and form, and what gave it its impetus to incorporate in 1966 was actually the Watts Rebellion. Mm-hmm. So out of the ashes of the Watts Rebellion, like a rising phoenix, for example, Inner City Cultural Center was born with the help of people like Gregory Peck, Marla Thomas, a bunch of people in Los Angeles, but Gregory Peck happened to be at the National Endowment for the Arts at the time.
Okay. And
with his help, Inner City became one of three theaters throughout the country to get what they call an Educational Theater Laboratory grant to begin their particular foray into providing an educational theater experience for young people. So they connected with the Los Angeles Unified School District, okay. And they began to bus 35,000 students annually for 3 years to the Inner City Cultural Center. Now, the difference between Inner City Cultural Center and the other theaters one was located in New Orleans and one was located in Providence, Rhode Island, okay. Is that Inner City Cultural Center decided to increase the cultural communications amongst minority and ethnic groups, was to create a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multidisciplinary performing and visual arts institution called the Inner City Cultural Center.
That's a mouthful.
It sure is. I always have to get it lined up so I can get it out correctly. So, and the other thing they did is they used the philosophy of colorblind and non-traditional casting, meaning that any actor of any multicultural or racial background could play any role. Mm-hmm. They were not restricted to stereotypical roles. Okay. That means, like, say, for example, in the first production in the following season, or after incorporation in 1967, you had a European play, Tartuffe, mm-hmm. in which Lou Gossett was the lead. Now, if it's a European play, that means the minority's not playing that role. You had, and on the same stage with Lou Gossett, you had Paul Winfield in the same play, as these are young actors, right? And then you also had a woman I saw in the credits, a lady called Bonnie, but not lady called, her name was, and still is, Bonnie Bedelia. And Bonnie Bedelia, for those who don't know, this is not the only thing she did, but most people might recognize her as Bruce Willis's wife in the Die Hard and Die Hard. Yes, that's Bonnie Bedelia, and they were all on stage at the time. Multicultural cast. In other words, Asians, blacks, African Americans, European Americans, Native Americans, all on the same stage. So that is like, but see, that was 67 now. So next year we're planning something on that. But basically, it's a 3-year, 3-phase project. Okay. In the 50th anniversaries are celebrating milestones, and this year we're doing the second of those 3 milestones. Okay. Focusing on that.
I like the use of that words, out of the ashes.
Yes.
1966 Watts riots.
Yeah.
And here you got a group of multicultural people coming together.
Yeah.
To learn how to be actors, actresses, anything.
Yeah. Because and it's interesting. We, in fact, Dr. Sandy Sheffy.
Yes.
And we co-wrote a book called Out of the Ashes, and the book had its debut in 1992.
Okay.
Right now, that's an interesting point because we entitled it Out of the Ashes because of the fires in Watts in '65.
Right.
And that's when Inner City got its impetus and people came together because they figured they needed this vehicle, the arts, to bring folks together for this communication. So what we did, we took, and since the production season started, the first production season started in 1967, we published a 30-year hit, or 20, I think it was 25, 30 years maybe. Somebody do the math. 67 to 92, that's 25 years, I believe. Production history using photographs to tell the story of the Inner City Cultural Center. Now, the interesting thing about that, in 1992, guess what happened? April 29, 1992, what happened in L.A.?
A small thing called an earthquake?
No.
Riot?
Well, it could have been called an earthquake, because even, in fact, that's funny you should say this, because Jack wrote a play called Earthquake,
right.
a musical based on social upheavals and whatnot going on in Los Angeles, like the election of Mayor Tom Bradley, which kind of shattered things.
Yes, it did.
But what happened, as we were completing the book, the city of Los Angeles was burning in 1992.
Right.
So it was interesting and how prophetic that our title of our book was Out of the Ashes because of 65, right?
Right.
And we were completing the publication of the book Out of the Ashes in 1992.
Can you show us a picture of the cover of that book by any chance? Okay.
I mean, this is just, so, I mean, when you get that kind of thing going on, and then in the fact that if you know your television history,
there you go.
there it is, yes. And that on that cover is the second Inner City Cultural Center, of course, the first, which was on Pico, New Hampshire Avenue. The first building was on Washington and Vermont boulevards, and then they moved kind of like up the street because that was the funding, and that was a whole lot of history. So you had the roles that minorities were playing in 1965. If you looked at TV, if you can Google it, check out the TV guide. You can see the roles for minorities. Were like almost like zero. Wow. Now we're in this age of diversity.
Yes.
So we went from multiculturalism, that's the title of our kind of thematic, from multicultural to out of the ashes, from multicultural to diversity. And this is where we are now, because we're considering that the original genesis of multiculturalism was the Inner City Cultural Center. So therefore, we're just claiming, and we're stating it, actually, that since multiculturalism has morphed into diversity, the original genesis, therefore the OG, as we're saying, the OG of diversity is the Inner City Cultural Center.
Wow. And we're having big diversity problems still.
Yes, even 50 years later. 50 years later, we're still dealing with issues of diversity in our mediums. And this is even presidential candidates have talked about, we want our cabinets and such was to look like America. Right. And we're still having issues with diversity. I mean, the Oscars, the last 2 years, so to speak, but they've been, and they've been doing well in trying to increase the body of people. But as you just have to ask the question, how come it took Inner City Cultural Center to look at that in 1965? Right. So I guess the communications have to continue. So our job is to continue that journey. And we have some other pieces that it's not just about doing and celebrating the history, but we have to celebrate the history because you have to understand, and we all understand that sometimes if you don't understand where you came from, you don't know where you're going. And it still rings true today. So people think they're reinventing the wheel and they're starting new, and diversity's not new. We've been struggling through this thing for forever. The point is to know what that is and understand that and to advance that. Be progressive by advancing. You have to advance all the time. You can't stay still with this stuff.
Okay. Ernest, you wear many hats. One of them, of course, is the chair of this committee. You're also a historian for ICCC.
Somebody told me that I should stop what I'm doing and open a detective agency.
Why not, if you can do it?
Well, and the point is that they were trying to tell me that I had an investigative mentality. Great. Which, when you start unpeeling this onion of Inner City Cultural Center and all the interconnectedness of people, like some of the things I just told you about, just one play, and the people that were in that one play and how they became, when they were coming from the East Coast or whether they lived in Los Angeles or wherever they came from, if they needed a place to hone their skills, to have people come or showcase their skills and have people come and see them. So, because, you know, people want to be in this industry, and it's like a company town.
Yes.
You know, you come here, why do you come here to Los Angeles? Now, it's kind of obvious for those people who come here trying to advance their career in film and television, not necessarily stage, but people find their access on the stage. They don't find it immediately in television and film.
Right.
And for those folks that were coming in at that time in 1965, Inner City provided that place. It was like that cultural oasis. But what I find out by the more I dig into the history, because even when I was going to school, when I first got in, I was going to school, and I found Inner City Cultural Center by asking a question. I said, where are people? They said, oh, you got to go to Inner City. I said, okay, I'm going to Inner City. Now, 40 plus years ago, I entered into that space, and it has served me to this day in every position that I've gotten, every relationship that I've made. Now, when I check out the relationships again, I find out the interconnectedness of the people. It's almost like genealogy. You know, this is a cultural genealogy, and you know, people have filmographies, but when you check, there's so many cross references. I could probably put together 3 or 4 or 5 or half a dozen stories about people that perform on stages of Inner City, wind up in films together, wind up in plays on Broadway together, and continue to have a relationship that first started at Inner City Cultural Center. So, in a sense, the history is with me. You know, I can't get it out of me. The only way I can really get is to share it. Actually, you have to share it with people, and this is some of the reason why we are, not just me, but why, you know, the alumni, what we call the alumni of Inner City, and, you know, not scattered throughout the world. They're strategically placed in the world. They don't know that how strategic they are to, you know, our history. And the history, see, the other important thing is the history, the cultural history of the city of Los Angeles, which are kept in the little pockets, in the little theaters of every, and it's not just Inner City, it's one of them, but we're talking about Inner City, so that's why I guess I'm a historian.
So now this celebration is going to be it's going to be a 2-day event.
2-day event, yes.
And then what's going to happen during that 2 days?
Well, Friday night we have our what we call our Black Tie Gala awards presentation.
Okay.
And it includes awards presentations and performances. Of course, we also always like to introduce new talent. That's what Inner City was always. That was primary focus: undiscovered talent or mid-career talent or whatever. Of course, we have a lot of people to draw on. So we're giving, presenting 2 awards. One is the what we call the Elaine Gail Koski Josie Dotson Award, which is going to go to the late architect Robert Kennard.
Can you show me a picture of Mr. Kennard, please?
And Mr. Kennard was an original board member of Inner City Cultural Center, and he, being an architect, met with actually he met the co-founder of Inner City Cultural Center, who was Dr. J. Alfred Cannon, who was a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA, and Jack was on the UCLA campus as well. This is where the 2 of them met, and so he liked what Mr. Kennard, what Dr. Cannon was talking about in Inner City, so he came down and as an architect, he helped to redesign in I think it was a Lowe's Theater on Washington Boulevard. That was the first space. And a corporation had given the theater over to Inner City for their housing. So that award goes, the Elaine Gail Koski Josie Dotson Award goes to him. And that award primarily is for people who kind of work behind the scenes, because Josie and Elaine were administrative directors at Inner City. Always working behind the scenes, but supporting everything that happened in that. The place couldn't have run without the administrative people that would provide the support, you know, for the actors and the dancers and the musicians and the writers. That was their job. So we always like to recognize the people that were behind the scenes by presenting them this award. And the second award is the Inner City Essence Award, which goes to actor and activist George Takei.
Okay.
Now, most people remember George, of course, from Star Trek.
Right.
And he was Lieutenant Sulu. Now, the interesting thing about this, see, there's a story behind everything. This is what I'm telling you, this interconnectedness. George and Jack met in the early 60s, if not in the late 50s. And George was in a play that Jack wrote, a musical called Fly Blackbird. And George, and then by this history and digging into this history, I find that they were also both at UCLA at the time.
Okay.
And where Jack was a rehearsal pianist in the dance department. So he met a number of people there. And again, a lot of conversations that were taking place at UCLA helped form the center. So they were this play ultimately went to Broadway and won an Obie Award. This was in 1961. They performed the play here. In fact, they performed the play where we are going to have the award show, which was not named the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. It was not even named the Ebony Showcase at the time. The original name of the theater was the Metro Theater. And in 1961, that play took place there. And the Inner City Essence Award is given to those folks, people who carry, in other words, the essence of what inner city is all about. And what George Takei represents is that essence, his art, his activism, almost his life carries the same kind of feeling and heartbeat that Jack gave to the Inner City Cultural Center. So that's the Friday night. And we have a great little crew we're calling the Diddy Crew.
Where'd you get that name from?
Well,
I think of Sir Diddy.
Yeah, right. And this is the original Ditty. Diddy. Jack wrote, like I said, a play called Earthquake. And, kind of like, again, the social, kind of, you see it's kind of tongue-in-cheek Earthquake, Los Angeles, and things of social significance that were kind of earth-shattering, but he did it in a very comical and musical way. And he always presented it with a multicultural cast. So he had a song called the Diddy Song, but he also had the Diddy Song, and he had a thing called, the Diddy Show, right? Encased within this musical's Earthquake. And they were just small little sketches of things, So we decided this would be great to use this title to relate back to a piece. This is the inspiration for the Diddy Crew, which we were really trying to develop into the Diddy Show. But we're taking a Diddy Crew, which are 5 fantastic young comedians that we auditioned. And you really we want everybody to see them because, again, this is a platform. But we're trying to incorporate some of the old, some of the new. And so we've called it the Diddy Crew. Not the Diddy Show yet, but the Diddy Crew. And they've all joined in to help us, develop this. And this is what Inner City is all about. But the Diddy Show, the Diddy Song, and the Diddy Crew, and the Diddy Team. We got a bunch of Diddies going on here.
Now, this is Friday. All this is going to happen on Friday.
All this is going to happen Friday night. And then after that, of course, we celebrate. We have, reception where people like to hobnob. Also, we're having... during the day, we're having people, which we did last year, Inner City alumni. We want them to schedule appointments for. We sit down and we give them about each about 20 minutes. So of course we're doing archival interviews. We're doing oral history interviews because everybody. And look, everybody can talk 3 days actually about the experiences in Inner City, but we're only 20 minutes. So we're just collecting everything we do. We're collecting. Of course, we have archives. Which again, everything we're doing is for a purpose, not just to have celebrations and not just to have parties. We have a specific, goal in mind. And then on Saturday, we begin again, with oral history interviews, so on and so forth, schedule. But we have 3 panels. We have library, the library as a cultural legacy, very important, because some of all of what I'm talking about. The end game, in a sense, the goal, really the ultimate goal is to get a library established in the name of C. Bernard Jackson to move all of the cultural history of the Inner City Cultural Center. All the Inner City alumni who would like to donate, gift, or provide other historical artifacts and so on. Yeah, that's Jack.
That's Jack.
That's Jack.
You mentioned his name on
And Inner City alumni plus the community of Los Angeles artists, or Los Angeles-based artists, of the type that Jack championed.
I see.
And the reason, again, is that we want to establish a cultural library as a legacy for all Angelenos, again, of the type that Jack championed, from the past, all of past history, the present, on into the future, because people start in communities, and Jack was a community-based organization. And when you see the names of the people that came through this community-based organization that are now, they've done Broadway shows, they've been Oscar nominees, and awardees, and Emmy awardees and nominees. Some of them had, by their introduction in the city, it's not that they became who we know them as now, is where they started. And we want to collect that from the beginning. If you were 5 years old today,
right,
and you came and took a dance class in the city, and you can say, my first experience, or if your first play, if you came to inner city, some people saw their first play at inner city 40 or 50 years ago, which stimulated them. I still have conversations with some people today about that. So if their history was recorded, and see, digitally now we can do this. We can record, and it can be archived. So 30 years later, if somebody wants to come out and see where, and when we're talking about historians, they want to research, where Ron Brewington got his start.
Right.
Oh, Ron started in the city?
In the city, right.
Now, you know how alumni networks work.
Oh, yes.
You're a Trojan, you're a Bruin, you're a NYU, you're a Yale, you this. You call your network and say, hey, I'm one of you guys, can you help me out? And see, this is the kind of thing. So if people don't know their history, again, where these cross references are, but that's the end game. So that's the library panel. And then we have a theater panel because of issues that are, brewing today in the theater community.
Such as?
One of them is they used to call it equity waiver.
Yes.
It might be intimate theater, it might be small theater now. This thing has morphed over the years. But, for a lot of years, the Los Angeles, it kind of started with, I think they call it a showcase code, where basically you were coming to Los Angeles and you wanted, again, to be seen by film industry people.
Right.
So the question was, well, how do I get to be seen? So a lot of actors, writers, started little small theaters. This is really the history of small theater in Los Angeles to some extent. In addition to the fact that people thought that they weren't really cultured, and this is another interesting thing about theater, is that they really wouldn't be cultured until they had an institution that dealt with literature, like on the East Coast or like in Europe.
Right.
So the whole thing about building that. So you have that issue. You have issues of funding, which is always an issue. Then you have issues of cultural equity, which is always an issue. In other words, where does the money go?
Yeah, where's the money?
To the bigger institutions, to people in the know, and where do the quote-unquote multicultural or those diverse organizations, or the organizations diverse enough? And if those organizations are not diverse enough, are they still getting money that should be directed to these organizations under this title of diversity, cultural equity? So that's the theater panel, and I think then we close with, as we did last year, we closed with the Hollywood Diversity Report.
Yeah, that's important.
Yes, well documented. Last year we had Dr. Hunt from UCLA.
Yes, Dr. Darnell Hunt.
Darnell Hunt provide. We haven't confirmed his attendance yet, but we know his report. But we're going to be addressing and looking at that report. And then also USC has done a report as well. Oh. So we're looking at both of those reports, and we have a really good panel of people that are in the industry. We usually like to combine, actors, people from a studio, if we can get one of those, or people from one of the craft guilds. And we have several folks. Well, actually, most of the panels are mostly filled. We're still waiting on the confirmations. I don't want to, put anybody out there right now that's not. But I mean, really, I'm just, but we have good panels. But that's the diversity panel, and that's usually all the panels are well attended because they're educational, plus they're free. The award ceremony in the presentation the night before is not free. It's can I say the price?
Yeah, please.
It's $40.
Yes.
Plus you get a reception, and you get great company, and you get photo ops,
yes,
and all that kind of stuff. Very festive evening. You know what I'm saying?
Sulu will be there.
Right. Oh yeah. You can beam me in, beam me up, beam me somewhere.
Oh yes.
No, he's an icon.
Yes.
And the interesting thing about that again is that Inner City was incorporated in 1966, right? George Takei got his role on Star Trek in 1966.
Right.
Also, the East West Players, which is the first Asian American theater company in America, also started at the same time. So we actually have 3 50-year celebrations fused into this one man because he was part of each one of these things. These very, that's, Star Trek is the first I'll call it MCD.
Yes.
Multicultural diverse program on television.
It sure was.
That's why Inner City is the OG of the Big D.
Nichols.
So, Nichelle. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was a phenomenal thing. I remember when I was in high school, somebody said, "Hey, man, did you see that show last night?" I said, "What show?" "Man, Star Trek." We watched it every week and had a conversation about it every week. It was that kind of like cultural event.
Yes.
That was going on. So that. That's $40. Like I said, $40. You have that, and then we close out Saturday with kind of a social networking reception where people can meet and greet and talk, and then talk about next year.
Ernest, it gives me, I know a lot of people in this town, great joy to see what your organization is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to take the time to gather all these people, keep in touch with them, honor them, let them have their last hoorahs and all that good stuff like that. Thank you so much, sir, for what you're doing.
It's one of the compelling reasons for doing it is that the physical buildings no longer exist.
Okay.
And this has to do again with issues related to financing and what they call board development and whether or not you got a strong enough board. It takes money to build an institution.
Yes.
And so thousands of people carry the memory and the history of inner city in their hearts and their minds, kind of thing. Yes. And some of them have, artifacts in their drawers and so on and stuff, in their boxes like I do and other people do. And so we're trying to get back and want to get back to the institution building. That means create the physical building, because one of the things that Jack always said was that a cultural institution should own its property. Yeah. And he ultimately owned 3 properties. Yes. Before his demise, and therefore saying everybody went, through the economics and whatnot, went in separate directions. But it's that kind of regathering and recalling of these truths, because now all of us with 40 years plus of experience, because experiences were different in 1965 than they are today. People are in some people are in much better positions, of course, today than they were then, economically and socially, politically, just being out in the world. And what place is there of an institution, a physical institution that can house the work of people, present it, and study it, and also present new opportunities for young people? So it's kind of like we're paying it forward but giving it back.
Gotcha.
Because when I could not, for example, and I'm not, this is not really one of those little violins. It's not a sad story, but there was just, it's just a fact. Yes. There were few opportunities for what we're calling, what we call then minorities, and then the multi-ethnic, racial, and cultural peoples, and what we're saying, like Hollywood has to be more diverse, or the political thing has to be more diverse. We're people, right, with content and expertise and all like that. It's like I like the James Brown piece. Just open up the door. I can do it myself, right, kind of thing. Well, I'm well trained now. I'm housebroken, whatever, So, I'm housebroken. You can bring me home, I know what fork to use. And a napkin, that kind of thing like that. So, we become acculturated over time, but we bring, expertise, content, passion, and everything to the table. Right. We know that we can create. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. It's the place that we need to be create in. It's always been the place, the institution. So we want to build the institution, you see, and it's absolutely necessary to what we want to do. So that's, like I said, the library is one thing. It's just not about celebrating and having a party. Right. I call it a party with a purpose. That's what we're going to be doing.
Party with a purpose.
Yeah.
Many famous guests, artists, have come at one time or another in their career through the house that Jack built.
Oh, yeah.
We got a little flick that we want to show everybody about. Okay. It's called The Circle.
Oh, The Circle, that piece that Jack did. Because everything that goes around comes around.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
A circle is formed by the joining of hands. It links us together across time-shifting sands. The circle reminds us that all things are one, that what may seem over has only begun. Each point of the circle is equal in length. Each part of the circle is equal in strength. If all things are equal, as the circle will show, then there is no high, there is no low. There is no weak, there is no strong. There is no short, there is no long. And no one need travel the circle alone. All things are united, as the circle has shown. They say every season has its own time, and every reason has its own rhyme. And there'd be no joy if there were no sorrow. Remember, today will soon be tomorrow. And even tomorrow soon will be gone. The circle keeps turning, keeps moving on. It has no beginning, it has no end. The circle will bring us together again.
Yay.
Man, that's
Put some tears in your eyes when you see some of that, folks. Just want to say that the narrator was Dr. Sandy Sheffy. She's the chairman of ICCC. You were the producer.
Yeah.
And a good friend of both of us, Bobby Martis,
Bobby
did the editing.
Martis,
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Dr.
He's
Sheffy.
alumni. We're all alumni.
All alumni.
And
yeah.
everybody just pitched in and, again, provided their expertise to
Yes.
this.
When I saw that, I said to myself, let's play that one because it's good that people can understand this wasn't a ragtag organization. These are top professionals. Now, we got a couple of films. You were very kind to bring us a couple of photos. Okay, if you can just run some of them, we'll take them one by one, sir. Okay.
They all have stories.
Okay, now what is this one, sir?
Oh, I sent this to you, then I was like, it's fresh in my mind.
Yes.
It's 4 Seasons.
Now, who's that guy in the middle there?
Calvin Lockhart, man.
Can you believe that? Calvin Lockhart.
Over there, over to his upper right, so to speak, Mel Carter. And the woman that's, go to, what is you right? That's Gloria Calumet.
Wow.
And then there's Emily Yancey on the lower left. I don't know who. Anyway, but Calvin Lockhart.
Yeah. When I started asking,
You remember Calvin Lockhart?
Right.
That was a very intense play.
Yeah. now, Jack, I never met Jack. He died,
96, I believe.
Something like that. What kind of guy was Jack like?
Jack was he was an amazing guy. I don't know. People use the term sometimes like Renaissance man.
Yes.
Jack was born in New York City.
Oh.
In fact, this is another story. Now, if Terry Carter's out there, then he can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe he and Jack were in the same high school in New York City. Now, Jack, the story was that Jack, he was in a gang.
Okay.
Right? In, I don't know if it was Brooklyn or whatever. But anyway, somewhere in New York, right? And so there was, this kind of turf thing with some of the Latino brothers at the time. So Jack actually was the only one that knew a little Spanish. So he became a diplomat.
Okay.
At that time. So I think he went into the Merchant Marine.
Okay.
Then he came out to L.A., and then he pursued his music, his M.A. in music at UCLA. Okay, that's when he met all these people and began this formulation of this concept of a multicultural organization. And so that was the whole inner city thing. Now, the other thing about that, now Jack is already bilingual, right? He's a composer. He's a lyricist. He's a playwright. He's a director. He had to become all these things in order to make inner city happen.
Right.
When I met Jack, as I've worked with him over the years from the time I got into, the university and whatnot, he was always recruiting and looking out, how to recruit people into the organization kind of thing. But Jack was also studying Korean.
Okay.
He was a linguist. And the reason being is that he wanted to have the ability to communicate with every cultural group in the city of Los Angeles. Even all the cultural groups there, but he always felt, I don't know, it's not that he felt inadequate. It was just a thing that he liked to do. And he had all this going on, and he had, reams of contacts from people that he had met from New York, knew that he was on the West Coast, the connections that he made, the people that he was able to bring to the West Coast for the first time.
Yes.
And when you look closely into it, you could see some of course, the tremendous burden that a man in his position carried, trying to do the type of thing that he was doing with, maybe not as much help as he could have gotten, you know, and let's just say with the help that he did. I think he, in one sense, actually helped more people than, in some senses, helped him. But by the same token, there were more people who wanted to help him that couldn't or not. The interesting time, but he filtered through all that, and he was able to maintain up until his demise, you know, for 30 plus years. You know, with the organization, and the time it took to build it. So I mean, he built a legacy. I mean, it's like, you know, what do you do with it? You know, kind of thing. That's a question. So the only, like I said, the only way we can answer the question is to do something, I believe, in honor of him, to provide for the same thing that he provided for us, kind of thing.
So y'all did a lot of plays. Y'all just everything started with ideas. This group over here, that group over there.
Well, it was interesting. Again, you have the multicultural. So Jack being bilingual.
Okay.
You saw a photograph of Mako, who started East West Players.
Right.
Now, the first all-Asian theater company in America, with Jack being the first multicultural ethnic racial group in America. They kind of since cross-pollinated to an extent that administrative people from East West came into inner city, worked for inner city, plays and writers. They would share writers and plays, kind of thing, support each other. Then Jack made a contact with Carmen Zapata, a bilingual foundation for the arts. And she was a young organization. Ultimately, Jack co-wrote plays with Carmen in Spanish, so that they were bilingual plays. Then Carmen's group was housed in Inner City Cultural Center. Later on, when Marla Gibbs had started Crossroads Arts Academy, which was on Vermont, and her career was building, they moved from Vermont. The place they selected to move to was the Inner City Cultural Center. So Inner City was housing people, companies, before those companies found their own places, right? And collaborating with folk, right? They were the first to bring the Negro Ensemble to the West Coast. The first
Hooks.
Yeah. Of course, see, Lou Gossett and the brother that was in Soldier's Story, Adolph Caesar. A lot of those people were in that first season.
Okay.
And they were coming from the East Coast to Los Angeles to play. He bringing a group, the Whirling Dervishes from Turkey. You know, Indian dance groups from, of course, India. Senegalese from Africa. Okay. You know, Japanese groups, Twyla Tharp, Bella Lewitsky. They with Donald McHale, created the Inner City Dance Repertory Theater Company. Carmen de Lavalade, who was Jeffrey Holder's wife. I mean, I could go on and on and on, you know. But the Jack in the Inner City, I mean, this is the kind of, you know, foundation, you know.
Yes.
It was bursting at the seams.
Wow. Bursting
at the seams. I mean, if you for example, if the story for the Dance Theater of Harlem, and there's still some dancers that danced and rehearsed in inner city studios that became members of Dance Theater of Harlem later. But the interesting thing about it, I remember hearing about it, and Arthur Mitchell saying, well, you know, because he was a premier dancer with one of the, you know, ballet companies in New York, but when he started the Dance Theater of Harlem, the whole thing against, you know, black folks dancers, oh, no, they got, the muscles are too big, the derriere is too large, and such that they could never be, you know, dancers. And so who's the premier lady of the African-American young lady, you know, that's dancing with the, I think it was the New York Ballet. Oh, yeah. It didn't come out of the dance theater. She was San Pedro. Yes. I saw her when she was 12. Copeland. Yeah, Copeland. I saw her when she was 12 years old. Notice, I mean, part of that story. Yes. But it's just amazing. I mean, barriers continuously need to be broken, whether it's in sports or arts or politics or whatever, and we're still, you know, dealing with that. Yeah. I guess I answered your question. Yes, you did. I think I did. I'm sorry.
You're watching The Actor's Choice. I'm your host, Ron Brewington, with my very special guest, Mr. Ernest Dillihay. Ernest, again, as you talk about how people were migrating here in the arts, they were coming in, people were providing homes and places for them to live and provide food. And this is just a magical dream. How did Jack get money to do all this?
Well, see, that was, issues, again, I'll go back to, you know, it's kind of like a political, well, I don't know if it's political, but in terms of history, you know, you always have to look at funding. When you look at any major cultural institution, and I'm talking Well, I mean, you can look at the Metropolitan Museum of Art,
Right.
for example, as a major, and it's a major cultural institution.
Yes.
On the West Coast, you look at the Museum of Modern Art, you know, or even the LA County Museum of Art, or the New Broad, or the Music Center.
Yes.
And what is the difference between those and Inner City Cultural Center, or the Negro Ensemble Company, or the DC Rep, or the St. Louis Rep, or the Dallas Rep,
Yes.
or Crossroads in New Jersey, or, you know, what's the major difference?
Right.
You look at it as funding.
Yes.
Institutions are built on funding, endowment, and so on and so forth. And so when Jack started, of course, he started with, you know, definitely identity and purpose and a direction, with some very qualified people, you know. And some of them I mentioned, like Dr. Cannon, neuropsychiatrist, UCLA. UCLA, what I'm finding out now is also the genesis of Inner City Cultural Center.
Really?
No, when I was going through my master's program in theater management, and my advisor, John Cobble, in fact, it was even before that, actually, it was my undergraduate years, because I got to take a minute with this. This in terms of this history again.
This is history.
This is history again.
Right.
And I'm discovering this every time I ask somebody something. It's been in my mind for years, but when I go further into it, this is that investigative thing. I got to ask the next question. It's like unpeeling this onion. Then you get to the center of this thing, right? Okay, I'm out here. I get involved ultimately in the arts. It's called the Ethnic Arts Program at UCLA. The director of the program is Allegra Snyder Fuller, daughter to Buckminster Fuller. This is the Ethnic Arts Program. In other words, to look at world art. It's called World Arts and Cultures today. So Dr. Beverly Robinson and I were in the first graduating class of this new major.
Quite a lady.
But I was also hooked up with Inner City during those years. So then what I discover is that and I think this is what John Cobble told me when he found out I was involved with Inner City. He said, Inner City used to have meetings in the green room over here at UCLA while they were talking about their formation. Wow. Now, last year when I met Cecilia Peck, daughter of Gregory Peck, who was also, and he was awarded the Elaine Gale Koshy Award last year posthumously. Cecilia came out and accepted. Then she began to share some stories with her father in the meetings that they were having at his home regarding Inner City Cultural Center. You have the UCLA connection, the LA Hollywood connection, and of course Marla Thomas.
Yes.
I think it was that girl. Was it that girl?
Yeah, Marla Thomas.
Okay. Then you had Eddie Albert and Margot Albert. You know, those kind of people. Robert Wise, a big Hollywood film director. I think it was West Side Story was one of his pieces that he directed or produced. Then you have all this connection. So so having the inner city not inner city, UCLA as the core, and then inner city, and then going from there, then you go to the NEA. So what Peck was able to do, being a member of the National Council for the Arts, when the whole thing erupted and it needed a third theater for this educational theater laboratory project, Inner City was there. The initial funding, big money for that time.
Yeah.
From the U.S. Department of Education, the Ford Foundation, the NEA, I think was $650,000 over a 3-year period. Very substantial at the time.
Yes.
To jumpstart that. So they were able to get the building, start to, so on and so forth. Then they moved to another building, and ultimately they paid off their mortgage. So they were always applying for grants. Ticket sales. Never got to the big endowment piece. Again, for institutional building, you need a big endowment piece. Okay. You need a big, powerful board. And you need the money. I mean, like some people start with, I would like to get a room named after me, and my name is so-and-so, and I can give you $20 million. Or like, billionaires do. They say, I got to do something with some money, so who can I give it to? I'll give it to UCLA, and they can, Dr. Dre, here's a couple of to the USC. And so who can give to Inner City to build an institution? So when those things basically, in a sense, dried up because we had political processes during the period of time we went through, kind of like the Nixon period. I mean, there was all the Kennedy period, which was, the Great Society, and the Johnson period. Money was flowing, that kind of thing like that. Even though it was still not enough money for cultural institutional building. For example, the new African American Museum opened on the Mall.
Right.
many, many, many years, but it's big enough, it's national enough for people that Oprah can give $20 million to, of course. But who could have given $20 million or $1 million, to inner city at the time? But other people could have and had given money to the building of the music center because they were bankers and politicians who supported having a cultural institution of that type in downtown Los Angeles for that development. The arts are very powerful in that respect because when those folks come together for art and culture, see, now it's not only it becomes a commodity, those are tremendous assets. And people have to understand that people are assets like the cultural. You and I are assets, and our engineer, we're assets. We have resources. When we put those assets together, we become very creative and very powerful because the creation and imagination is the most powerful tool in the universe.
Amen.
And when people capture that, they can corral a whole lot of stuff. So our idea, it's not even an idea. Well, no. It's an idea that has not fully realized itself. But I'm calling on all peoples, all inner city alumni, alumnus, whatever you want, alumni, alumnus, and alumni.
Yes.
To let us know where you are and to join us in what we want to accomplish. And I mean, I've said a lot, but I hope you understand that the power of the funding is still an ongoing situation. And if edifices are to be built in people's names, and you want to support that edifice and even get your name attached to it, as your name might have been attached to inner city when your career was developing, come on back. I mean, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has a library, rightfully so.
Yes.
Those are where, and Hollywood doesn't make these people. These people bring their resources to them so that they can create image. All we're saying is, well, we're the so-and-so launch. How about the launch pad? Let's fund the launch pad. Okay? And then we can, and we don't mind being a conduit for Hollywood or for theater or, or recording industries. We don't mind, so help us out.
That is a need. Many good famous names like Denzel Washington, others came through this organization.
Right. It's time, money, and like I say, if it's not time and money, time. If it's not money, it's time.
Right.
It's like, give us 20 minutes of your time. Right. Invite your friends.
Right, please.
Come on over. Break bread with us. Bring your friends over. Sit down, see what we're doing, and we can build this thing together. Sure. And see, that's the way this will stay 1,000 years. This is pyramid building.
Thank you.
Not a scheme. No. This is the actual edifice that is hollowed now, 6,000 years old. Right. Any institution that is brick and mortar is going to be way beyond, our time. But what's in the content that's in it, that's important. Right. That is the important thing.
Because we see a lot of young people, some come in the show, we try to bring them on the show, who want to get and become an actor.
Right.
Actress. And they should look back and say, oh, look who was with me, who started this thing. Right. That's where they get their roots from. Yeah.
That's where they get. I heard a story, a young actor, I don't know if I should say his name, and if you want me to, I'll say it at the end. I don't think you've been. In fact, I think you had him on your show.
Okay.
All right. He went to USC.
That narrows it down.
Okay. Young African American, I think is he might use 3 names. One of them is Alan.
Oh yeah, Alan. Oh yes, of course. yes.
But I remember that, and I believe his story was because he was doing he was working to play an Ebony Showcase,
right?
That Ren Brown does, who's an inner city alumni, right? And which is the Nate Holden. The Ebony Repertory Theater is running the Nate Holden, operating Nate Holden. And we had inner city alumni had a theater party, so we were in this is before our first event last year, so we were in the having invited the cast and crew to come on in and join with us at our receptions, post-show reception, that party that we were having, because we had gotten a group to go, and so we were sharing stories, and we had made the announcement that we were doing our first program last year. So William Allen Young said, when he met Bea Richards, because what happened was, I think he had met Jack first. He was in a competition, got a scholarship. The scholarship he got was to be in Bea Richards' class.
Okay.
Bea Richards, as you know, Academy Award nominee for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and a student and a protege of Frank Silvera, who started a Frank Silvera workshop in the Theater of Being. Right, this is like the Stanislavski's method, right? But this is Frank Silvera, and Bea was the protege, and she carried that on. William Allen Young is in her class. He says, to paraphrase from memory, that when he met Bea Richards, at Inner City Cultural Center, then he knew it was possible for him to do what he was doing today.
He's on Coal Black now,
Okay.
second year,
Yeah.
doing well.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to be around.
No,
that
it's
guy.
nice. I mean,
Nice guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one story.
Yeah, there's many.
Oh, there's, it's like the Naked City. Remember that show? The
Yes, Naked City, yes.
million
Yes,
stories. We
sure.
got, we
Got
have
a few more photos you want to see before we
Sure,
run out of
yeah,
town?
no problem.
Okay, here's one.
Oh, this is, in fact, I worked this particular show. That's Gloria Amelia Flores. I remember her name.
Okay.
She was a deputy director at the California Arts Council, what we used to call Governor Jerry. That was when Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown, as they call him,
Moonbeam. Moonbeam, yes.
Of course, he drove around the '76 Plymouth. He didn't want to, and I mean, it was interesting at the time.
Yes.
Anyway, she was a deputy director of the California Arts Council.
Mm-hmm.
That's Ferraro, who was the president
Of the city
of
council.
the city council at the time, and C. Bernard Jackson.
Yes.
And what had happened is that we were doing an award show because we had gotten, I think it was what they call CETA money at the time. So we had this graduation ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had dedicated 2 murals that were done outside from artists that were part of this CETA program that were done on our building and the building across the street. So this is kind of like a photograph of the people who were invited that day to present at the awards ceremony.
Okay.
Sometime in the mid 70s, might have been.
All right. Next photo, please.
Okay, that's
Milton Berle.
Milton Berle. That guy is so funny. That he was an MC. Of course, it's Eddie Albert.
Yeah, it is.
And his wife, Margot Albert, who was a Latina, she and Jack were, kind of like tied at the hip, and she was part of the Plaza de la Raza over there in Lincoln, I think it's Lincoln Park.
Okay.
That was her creation. But anyway, that's her husband in Milton, and this is the Elaine Gail Koshky Award. And I think that was the first year the Elaine Gail Koshky Award was given. I forgot who it was given to. But I do remember that Sumi Haru, who's passed now, was also on that program, and I remember Milton Berle is a crack up, man.
Yes, he is. Yes.
That was that.
Next photo, please.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Oscar Brown Jr. And Oscar Brown Jr. was the third. That's the father on the right, and his son on the left. So again. Interesting thing about this, I met him years later when I was performing arts director, and I was the office was at the Los Angeles Theater Center, and he came in with Nichelle Nichols, because in Chicago, because I think, what was that? I can't remember the piece that they did together that she was in originally, but I remember this guy. He's a poet, musician, and my only regret in terms of that is that I was not able to do any of his work. I met him in Inner City. This is Inner City, but later on when he came to LA Theater Center, I was not able to continue the conversation about doing his work on stage. And great guy.
Next one, please.
Now this.
Who is that over there on the second right? Who is
with
that?
hair. Maybe that's the name of the show, hair. But everybody had hair. Then look at it. My elbow is on Dennis Wilkerson.
Okay.
Dennis is a Native American.
Okay.
He was the technical director. This guy could build anything. If anybody remembers Inner City, he built the stages, the amphitheater in the Inner City, which we call the amphitheater, and then a little small stage in basically a place that was just full of junk. He created another like a 50-seat space, and then he created a larger space. Great TD. It's like a spiritual guide.
Yes.
In the middle there is Elaine Gail Koshky.
Okay.
Some people say she was the first paid full-time staff member of Inner City Cultural Center, of Japanese descent. And she passed while on a trip to California Arts Council panel, and passed, and so that's why in her and Josie Dotson actually same situation, passed before Jack did, and so the awards are named after her and Josie. And the other guy with the glasses on is George C. Wolfe.
Oh yes.
Who Jack met at I forget which college, but Jack said, no, you got to come to inner city. And so George C. Wolfe, who left inner city with a couple of bucks, so to speak, and some contacts, and that's just part of the story, you know. But ultimately, people need to grow, and he grew. Mm-hmm. But he always is credited inner city with his own discovery, his own maturation as an artist. You know, ultimately he went to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. He wrote a play, he wrote a bad play, and then he wrote a play that, kind of took off, and then he became a director of Joe Papp's Public Theater. Mm-hmm. Then he had several plays, Jelly's Last Jam, and of course last year, Angels in America, mm-hmm. big, where he was a Tony Award winner, and he had gotten nominated for several Tony Awards. And last year, when George Takei's show was on Broadway, I think it just closed during the year that Shuffle Along was nominated, mm-hmm. and George was nominated as the best director, but Hamilton won.
Yes.
But George was still nominated for Shuffle Along. But again, those are the people. Okay.
Next photograph, sir.
Just a few. Oh, there's Gloria Calumet on the right again. And you know the guy in the middle? He was in Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
Terry Carter.
Terry Carter.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forget the lady's name on the left, but Brazilian. See, here's another interesting thing that Jack did. There was a movement in Brazil, mm-hmm. the Afro-Brazilian movement, mm-hmm. and a gentleman's name, I forget his first name, but the Nascimento, poet, playwright, mm-hmm. activist in Brazil, and visual artist. So this is his play. It's called Sortilegio. Okay. It reminded me of the film Black Orpheus, the play did. Mm-hmm. But it was a whole Brazilian festival that Jack created in the 70s. Jack was bringing in things that people had no clue, but he was giving people clues, but say, hey, come on, you gotta, so this is one of those pieces. Yeah.
Next one.
Checkmates. I should have gave you the picture of Ron Milner, who was the playwright, one of the key playwrights in what we call during the 60s and early 70s of the Black theater movement in mm-hmm. this country that we called it. But this is a play about relationships that he did called Checkmates. And so you see there's 2 Academy Award nominees and an Academy Award winner in Denzel Washington and Paul Winfield in the mm-hmm. same play. This play, in fact, Gloria, I think, had something to do with this play, as well as Marla Gibbs and Angela Gibbs. This play played at Inner City Cultural Center. Mm-hmm. Then it went to the Westwood Playhouse, which is now the Geffen Playhouse. Mm-hmm. And then it went to Broadway. Mm. And I remember one of the first meetings, I won't tell that story now, one of the first meetings I had with Denzel when he first came. I think he was doing, what was that show? St. Elsewhere, I think, mm-hmm. was the show. And I think he'd also gotten a nomination for an Academy at the time, or Oscar at the time. But anyway, those are, that's that history, man.
We're out of time. Unfortunately, we could sit here for a couple of hours. Yeah, we're out of time.
You gotta be kidding.
I got a lot more things. But before you go, Ernest, please tell us about events, dates, places, times. How can I get tickets?
The box office will open soon.
Okay.
If anybody's interested for reservations, however, prior to the box office opening to sell tickets, they can email us at the Inner City Cultural Center at Gmail.
Okay.
Long Inner City Cultural Center at gmail.com or call 213-234-1717. Leave a message. We'll take all that information and get back to folks.
Okay.
Yeah. And we also say, even though this event is coming November 4th, we're saying stay tuned for 2017.
Right.
That's the third leg of the 3-legged stool, and that's going to be, how do the young people say? Off the chain. Maybe that's old now. I don't know. Language changes so fast.
Well, Ernest, we want to thank you very, very much for stopping on by today. Thank you, man. There's so much information that you have, and I hope that our viewers and listeners will have an opportunity to check out the event. And we want to say special thanks, of course, to Ernest Dillihay and also Jack, C. Bernard Jackson. I want to thank him for what he did. And we'll see you next time.